Hi friends, welcome back. Today I'll show you my digital coloring method and my overall coloring process. I'll show you how I do this on Procreate, but this simple technique can be replicated on pretty much every drawing software today. This is very basic knowledge and I'm sure you've seen other artists using this method by now, but I'll show you how I approach it and simplify it in steps. So if you're a beginner, this video is for you. For those who just stumbled upon my channel, hello, I'm Hallie. I'm a digital artist focused into character design, and this is my YouTube channel where you can find tutorials like this one, but also studio vlogs, ASMR process videos and more. If you enjoy this type of content, please subscribe so we can keep on building a nice, comfy community of chill people with a passion for art. Enough rambling now, let's jump into the video. So my coloring method is divided into 3 simple steps: base colors, shading, ambient light, or rendering. Dividing shading and rendering in 2 distinct parts will allow you to have 2 final results when you're done with your artwork, and I find this to be very useful, especially when I work on a character design. I can keep the original unaltered colors of my character with the option of creating an environment for it, kinda like placing it under ambient lights. But let's start with the basic coloring. Okay, so for this method, we're gonna start with our line art ready, and it will stay in a layer above everything else. I still have the sketch here, and I'm going to lower the opacity, just a little bit. Let's create all the layers for each part of the artwork. So I'm gonna start from the skin, and again, it will stay under the line art layer. So let's start with skin coloring. You can do this part for the base colors however you please. I like to do it by hand, but you can feel or you can select the part. You can do whatever you please. Alright, so let's create another layer for hair. When we reach the hairline, I like to use the softness of the brush to create kind of a natural transition between the skin and the hair, so you don't have any harsh lines. And then I like to do a few loose strands on the sides like this, maybe on the braids. Again, to keep everything natural. And let's fill it in. So if you happen to see these weird conjunction lines when you fill, just go in and hide them. Sometimes they're not noticeable, but when you start coloring and shading, you'll see them, so you can go back and fix that. Alright, so next, new layer, new base color for her top. And now all the little details here. I think this part is darker, so I'll check with the reference later on, but for now let's just turn the brightness down. Again, another layer, and we'll do the eyes. A new layer for the iris. So at this stage, sometimes I take the sketch and I put it above just to see the reference for the eyeball. So now our base colors are ready and we need to start shading. So let's start from the skin. We create a new layer, tap on it, and you need to tap on clipping mask. So now this layer is tied to our base color. This means that whatever I do on this layer, so I can go in like this. You can see we won't go out of the borders, so it makes coloring really easy and fast. So on this layer I'm gonna do the shading part, and I usually start with a soft brush, and I'm going to kind of mark where I want my shading to be, an initial guideline. Some indication for her blush. And then let's pick a round brush like this one. This is my Lineart brush, but I use it for this type of shading too. And I'm gonna place the upper lip. Let's use the sketch as a guideline. Now this is a stylistic thing, but you can do, of course, however you please. And let's keep on shading. Now I take a flat brush and I start adding some harsh shadows here and there. I really like to focus on the eyes in my artworks, so I'm gonna be marking this part and also the upper eyelid. Then with our blender, I am going to blend the lower part of the blush like this. I like to use the blender from time to time for these little details here, and I always keep one part harsh because this gives dimension. Yes, as you can see, I like to mix and match my brushes to give as much dimension as possible. Okay, let's switch to more of a peachy, rosy peachy shade for the blush. And the way I do this is I place two lines like this under the eyes, and then with the blender I only blend the lower part. See? Let's go with a darker color and intensify it a little bit right here. And let's not forget the hair strands falling on her face. And I'm also gonna add some freckles. Just a little bit to give texture to the skin. Now let's create another layer for our highlights. Since she has a fair skin tone, I'm gonna go with a white. So as you can see, this method is condensed in 3 layers for each part of the artwork, and of course you're free to use as much layers as you want or combine them. Sometimes if I'm doing a drawing for myself, I just like to alpha lock the layer, and again this does the same thing, but on the base layer whatever I do will stay within the borders, because I'm sure I'm not going to change the colors later on. But if I work on commissions, this method is great, because if the client asks for a color change, you're free to go back and change every little single color in your artwork. So we have our iris now. In my channel you can find a full tutorial on eye coloring, so you can follow that one. I'm gonna speed this part up for now. Alright, so we're done with the eyes and we can move on to the hair. Same process. New layer, clipping mask, and let's start with shading. Okay, let's create a new layer, and this will be our first highlight, because for hair we're gonna have 3 layers in total. At least that's what I do usually. To make this more vivid, you can even set the layer to add and lower the opacity a little bit, and then blend the edges just a tiny bit. And then last layer, set it to add. Yes, we're gonna use the same brush, but this time it will be much smaller, and we're gonna start placing our main highlights. Perfect. Let's repeat the same process for her top. As you can see here, I'm using a flat brush to add some of the folds here and there. I like it to look a little bit messy and give it kind of a sketchy vibe. See, and making use of the shape of the brush to create natural folds on the clothes, it's the best way you can do this, but I'll film a tutorial on clothes later on. Let's change the brush. New layer, clipping mask, and let's do our highlights. Here, as you can see, I'm placing some rough lines that I'll blend later, only the lower part. And then with the Lineart brush, I'll go on the edges. Now the details. New layer. Now this time, since we are coloring some golden metal parts, I'm gonna set this layer into add. Perfect. Now that we're done with all the basic shading, we can go back to the skin, because after we colored the hair and the eyes, you can see that it can look a little bit washed out, so it's best to go back and intensify the shading a little bit. So at this stage I can go back to the line art and I can alpha lock this layer as I showed you before. This means that again, whatever I do on this layer will stay within the borders of the layer. So we can change the line art color. I usually keep the shadowy parts in black and just go, as you can see, on the lightest parts. Okay, so I placed everything into a new group because we're gonna start rendering. Again, I have a full tutorial where I go in depth into rendering, so if you wanna watch it, here it is. And let's pull everything together with this artwork. So as you can see, I exported the PNG and I re-imported it into a flat image. If you're working in another software like Clip Studio, you don't need to do this step. You can simply group everything and create another layer and clip it, but as you can see, we cannot do this on Procreate. Why? So we have to do this extra step, and right now this is our new base. So let's create a new layer, let's set it to multiply and clip it. You can also go and change the hue of this shadow, as you can see, depending on the vibe you want to give to your character. And at this point we're gonna create another layer, clip it and set it to add. And this will be kind of our bounce light. And for this I usually like to use a complementary color, for example a blue, because as you can see we have kind of a reddish shadow. So on the other side our main light source comes from the right and our bounce light will be on the left. This needs to be very delicate because it's easy to get carried away and it will overpower your entire artwork. So just a tiny bit here. So this is the before and this is after rendering. You can also lower the opacity of your shadow to make it more or less dramatic of an effect. So I'm gonna set this to 77%. So since we're done with the artwork, it's time to check proportions a little bit. You can tell I was rushing with this one because there are some things that need a little bit of fixing. So I just select both the base artwork, the shadow and the highlights, and I go into Liquify and just adjust some of the proportions. Just slightly, we don't want to alter the artwork way too much. For example, this detail is a bit off-centered, so I'm gonna bring it more to the middle. And another thing I always do is creating an additional layer, not clipping it this time, and I just had some hair strands. I always had some additional hair strands at the end of the artworks just to kind of make it look more natural. I didn't like this gap between this hair strand and the ear. Switching between different shades of blue, as you can see, so I can give dimension to each strand. Sometimes I also use a flat brush and I create kind of these shadowy lines. It kind of gives the illusion of bokeh into the hair, which I really like. And placing our final details. and I think we're done. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and I really hope it was helpful. Of course, remember to subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the content, and I'll see you on my next video. Take care. Bye!